The moment someone says you're quiet in a room full of people, there's this half second where you consider explaining yourself. And the moment someone says you're quiet in a room full of people, usually loud ones, there's this half second where you consider explaining yourself. And then you don't. You do the smile, maybe a half shrug, and then you go back to observing whatever was more interesting than justifying your silence to someone who probably wouldn't have listened to the answer anyway. That experience, it's not a quirk. There's actually an entire psychology behind it. Most people assume quietness is a volume problem. Like somewhere along the way, the quiet person just didn't get enough encouragement to speak up. And if you could only coax them out a little, they'd blossom into someone more comfortable, more present. This assumption is so common and so wrong that it almost deserves its own diagnosis. Jerome Kagan, a psychologist at Harvard, studied infant temperament, specifically a group he identified as high reactive. These were babies who cried harder, kicked more, and became visibly overwhelmed in response to new stimuli, a new face, sound, or environment. Their nervous systems were, from the very beginning, doing more processing with the same inputs than other infants. When Kagan followed these children forward into adolescence and then adulthood, a significant portion of them had become quieter, more inward people. Why was that? Well, their nervous systems were built to take in more, which makes the world, sensory-wise, emotionally, a louder place to occupy. So when you see someone at a gathering who's barely speaking, who looks like they're doing mental calculus instead of having fun, they might actually be experiencing that room at an abnormally high resolution than everyone cheerfully shouting over the music. Because the world wasn't built for high resolution. The world rewards throughput. More words, faster, now, fill the silence before it gets weird. Quiet people spend a ton of energy in social settings managing the gap between what they take in and what feels worth saying. By the way, that gap is where a lot of the quiet person's private comedy lives. The fully formed response, developed in real time, then abandoned because the moment passed and someone else already said the obvious thing and got the laugh, and the quiet person is just sitting there, holding this unexploded thought with nowhere to put it. Sometimes they text it to one person later, at like 11 p.m. That person thinks they're the funniest human alive, but nobody at the party will ever know. It's a particular kind of loneliness, being funny in a way that's invisible. And here's what happens over time. Quiet people often grow up absorbing a particular message from the world around them. Report cards mention it. Parents worry about it in that careful yet concerned way that still communicates something is wrong. Relatives at holidays treat it like a problem to be solved with enough questions, as if the right one, delivered with enough enthusiasm, will finally crack something open. The accumulated message, received over years of gentle correction, you're taught that your natural inner state is somehow less than what's performed outwardly. So a lot of quiet people stop being only quiet, and also become private. Those are different things. Quiet is a volume setting. Private is something that happens after enough people treated your thoughts like a novelty act instead of a conversation. It's a boundary that nobody consciously chose, but arrived at, the way calluses form. What almost nobody sees, and this should genuinely bother us, is that quiet people are very often the most attentive people in the room, not nodding along while building their next sentence.
Most attentive people in the room. I guess I'll say this is more like because like quiet people are more rare, I guess. I think this world is just more like pretty much into like loud noise, and pretty much the quiet person is the one that pretty much seems to be pretty much the other one out to most people. So I guess pretty much they're the most attentive.
Actually listening the way people used to before everyone got addicted to being heard. They tracked the thing you said 20 minutes ago that contradicts what you just said now, noticed when your voice shifted. They caught the moment you glossed over something quickly, which usually means it mattered. Meetings are a particular kind of case study here. Someone is saying something that could have been an email. The quiet person figured that out within the first 40 seconds, has already identified the actual decision that needs to be made, and is now watching three other people talk around it in real time. They probably won't say anything, since the room isn't asking. The strange cruelty is that these are the people most often described as distant. Okay, something worth slowing down for. What happens when a quiet person actually decides to speak? When something has crossed whatever internal threshold exists between "I'll keep this to myself" and "this needs to be said." Those words tend to land differently than words from someone who talks constantly. Not always, but often enough that the people around them notice, even if they couldn't explain why. It's because those words have been lived in for a while before they were released. They already know exactly what they mean before they say it, and the precision of that, even if they'd never call it precision, is a rarer quality than we've collectively decided to value. Getting close to a quiet person, real close, takes patience that most people don't come with naturally. The early
Yeah.
stages of any relationship carry this particular weight for them where they can feel someone trying to understand them through conversation, and they're watching the gap between what others see and what's actually there, wanting to close it but not knowing how to share their interior without it feeling like too much too fast. Some people never get let all the way in, and they of course know this. They count the people who got through on one hand usually, and they hold on to them with something that could be generously called loyalty and more accurately called relief. There's also the matter of how quiet people handle their own inner weather, grief, frustration, the occasional moment of joy that catches them off guard, which tends to linger on longer than they'd ever let on. Feelings don't get processed outward for them, they get dissolved slowly, the way sediment settles, which means the people in their lives often have no real idea what's happening inside them. And not because the quiet person is deliberately withholding, it's that the interior experience doesn't always have a direct translation into language, and they stopped trying to force it into words a long time ago. They constantly carry the gap between what they feel and what goes unspoken, quietly, the way they carry most things. None of this is shyness exactly, though shyness can absolutely live alongside it. It's a different relationship with language altogether, one where words carry weight, where saying something thoughtless feels physically uncomfortable. The social pressure to fill silence just to make everyone else less awkward seems genuinely bizarre. Why would you say something just to say it? That question probably feels obvious to you, and to someone else, it sounds like a statement from a different planet. Actually, it says something worth sitting with. There are two different ways of
I would say like when it comes to like the thoughts, especially if someone pretty much just talk bad than you on the games, I would say is that time that pretty much I don't know how to think. I would say like let's say like someone like pretty much talks bad about you on the game and you just had like that moment, so you just want to explode everything, but your mouth remains silent. And I would say here's one thing about like pretty much keeping your mouth shut. It's also more control because one thing is it's easier to lash out than it is to like pretty much like keep silent. And plus, like think of like pretty much talking as like energy. So if you just straight up like have someone who insults you really hard with no control of yourself, you're more likely gonna get you're gonna more likely speak out negative words if you're not careful with your own thoughts. So I would say is silence is very powerful, very powerful. lot of people just think pretty much being louder is better, but sometimes being silent can also save you a lot of energy. And if you also sit in silence and you found peace in that, pretty much you are pretty much exposing your like true fullness of yourself. So how can being that old pretty much be like pretty much good all the time? Sometimes you just need to be in the silence to expose like your true character. Sometimes, like think about yourself in like a I would say like a desert where there's like nothing there, just sands and yourself. That's where everything just starts to pop out, and you see everything inside you. All you will see is yourself and God. And from a sitting in that silent in peace, you can see everything that's been pretty much hiding inside you more clearly, and pretty much being like isolated also in silence can also like give you like a lot of breathing room, because being in like closed areas or loud areas can sometimes feel very suffocating. Yeah, pretty much.
Moving through social reality, and we've decided without much discussion that one of them is the default and one of them is the deviation. The loud one got to set the standard. The quiet one has been gently failing it ever since. Quiet people aren't waiting to become more talkative. They're not a project. Most of them are doing something constantly that looks like nothing from the outside, carrying full conversations in their heads, processing the
Oh
texture of
yeah,
their own experience with a level of
definitely.
attention that regular small talk genuinely cannot hold. And maybe that's what matters most here. The next time you're in a room with someone who isn't saying much, don't rush to fill it. Don't make it a thing. Just stay in the silence for a moment. See what it feels like. They'll notice. They always do. One last thing, and I only mention things I think people here would genuinely get value from. There's a link in the description to a set of 7-day guides built around things a lot of quiet, inward people tend to struggle with privately. Stuff like mental overstimulation, constant background noise in your head, rebuilding
Yeah.
focus, fixing your sleep schedule, and pulling yourself out of that state where your brain never really feels settled. They're structured around small daily actions instead of just more information to consume, which honestly matters more than most people realize. If that sounds useful, it's in the description and pinned comment. And if you enjoyed this video, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future uploads.
Yeah, that's one of the things of people who don't really talk much. Even though the quietest one in the room may seem off. But I'm telling you, if y'all actually be silent and actually observe the rooms, you can actually like pretty much gather a lot of information and learn about the person more when you just pretty much observe them and witness everything they do. So you try going to like a let's say like a area that you have like friends from. I try to be like the quietest one without saying much, or just be quiet and listen to everybody. Everything becomes more clear, and pretty much quiet people can tend to learn about people more easier than like talkative people. So yeah, This would be good. Or sign someone is a narcissist. Psychical.
The signature characteristics of many personality disorders can be quite unpleasant, such as the case of narcissistic personality disorder. Interacting with an NPD sufferer can be confusing, frustrating, and even hurtful. The NPD individual will often overlook or ignore many of these traits that make them unlikable. Here are 9 signs which may be a result of narcissism. 1. Instead of listening, they're wrapped up in their own opinion. Ever felt looked down upon or ignored, even though that person was in no position to do so? You might have encountered a sign of narcissism. Their perception leads them to believe what you have to say isn't important, so they blank it out. Rather than actively listening and integrating in discussions, they treat all conversations as a platform to present their ideas only, which they think are the only ideas worth listening to. 2. They tend to cheat in relationships. Narcissists feel they're treasures that are too good for anyone. Bring this attitude into a relationship, and you have lightning waiting to strike. Cheating is often a way for narcissists to build their ego. Author Caterina Valentini at Psychology Today says that narcissists are incapable of forming any kind of normal relationship and will wreak havoc in partners' lives. Betraying someone and leaving them in great grief gives a narcissist a rush of power. 3. They constantly need to be admired. If you've seen a narcissist, maybe you've seen that they almost swagger, oozing conceit and arrogance with every breath. They may look like they possess tremendous confidence, but it's not enough. They need constant admiration. The delusion of always being entitled to admiration is why people around them often find themselves emotionally drained. To them, there's no greater rush than being put on a pedestal and worshipped by their fans and followers. 4.
Yeah. That type of stuff definitely feeds their egos. Like that constant admiration, the need to be worshipped, bro. That feeds their egos.
They do not take any criticism well.
Oh yeah, that's.
Have you ever commented on something someone said and they lashed out at you? Maybe the reaction was more hostile than expected. They think they're superior to others around them and believe themselves to be infallible. They react poorly, maybe yelling, throwing a tantrum, or with another unreasonable response when they perceive what you've said might be criticism. 5. They exploit others without guilt or shame. Narcissism and empathy don't go hand in hand. Narcissists are unwilling to see the world from the perspective of others. As a result, they're able to exploit others without any feeling of remorse. They can manipulate people to fulfill their own needs without regard for the consequences that their actions may have on others. 6. They belittle others. The narcissist thinks they're the best and brightest, so seeing proof that dictates otherwise, like someone who is more talented than they are at a particular activity, is a rude shock. The response is to make sure that the person is below them, where the narcissist feels most others belong. They try to be dismissive about the other person, to show that they don't really even care about them. And if that doesn't work, they resort to personal attacks. They belittle and intimidate the other person in order to assert their superiority over them. 7.
Oh, nice. I just do not like stuff like that, bro. That's just like that's just sad and painful. Like, why just want to like be like the one with the like the biggest much egos? why would you have to belittle others to make yourself feel secure? It really just don't make sense. You can still be secure while still being on the same level as others.
They see themselves as more attractive than they really are. Despite the fact that everyone should feel attractive, there's a fine line between a healthy self image and being delusional. This line is often crossed by narcissists who believe that they are exceptionally attractive regardless of having any imperfections. The narcissist uses this perceived superior attractiveness to justify to themselves why they're too good for everyone. 8.
If there are any narcissists out there, I just want to tell you pretty much no one looks better than the others in God's eyes. So pretty much any narcissist man and women out there in God's eyes, we both look the same. We both on the same level and we have our uniqueness.
They gaslight those who are dear to them. Have you ever noticed feeling that you can't remember anything correctly around a specific person? When you're with that person, do you feel a little like you've lost your mind? That's due to gaslighting, a tactic narcissists use in order to manipulate and gain power and control over those around them. Gaslighting is frightening because it's insidious. The manipulation is lengthy and gradual, so the victim doesn't notice it happening, like when you grow taller. The end result of the long-term gradual manipulation is the devastation of the victim. It can reduce the most healthy, confident person down to being a shaking, paranoid shell. The victim no longer believes they know what's real, so they adopt the reality of the abuser, giving the narcissist full control. 9. They put some people on pedestals. Our last sign seems oddly contradictory to the other signs, but it is very logical, and here's why. Narcissists believe that they have to have perfection in everything, including people they associate with. A narcissist will often cozy up to someone higher in status, believing that their perfection will somewhat rub onto them. For example, that suck-up in class who always gets the lecturer's full attention, or the brown-noser at work who barely does any work but gets promotions? Do you or does anyone you know show these signs of narcissism? Tell us which sign or signs you find most helpful and why in the comments below. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might benefit from it.
Yeah, definitely do not ever be a narcissist. And here's another thing is, if y'all ever encounter a narcissist, just to let you know, narcissists are unchangeables. Only they can change themselves. If you try to like pretty much help a narcissist change, all you're really doing is just feeding them and letting them use you as a like pedestals. And you try to convince them or like try to encourage them, hey, do this. This will help you a lot. Then they would say, okay, and you just see that they are still the same as before. It's just like they don't really want to change. Yeah, it's definitely sad. Um, see.
Have you heard the story about Ronald Reed? The janitor that had $8 million in savings when he died in 2014. Yeah, you heard that right. Janitor, $8 million.
It's a lot.
And he didn't win the lottery or inherit the money either. He just saved consistently throughout his life, while letting the wonders of compounding do its thing. The moral is that your behavior with money is oftentimes more important than how intelligent you are. Even if you don't have a diploma from Harvard or work on Wall Street, you can become rich by just behaving in a sound way. As Morgan Housel puts it, financial success is not a hard science. It's a soft skill where how you behave is more important than what you know. Spend your next 10 to 15 minutes on this video and you might excel on the soft skill of investing. This is a top 5 takeaway summary of The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And this is The Swedish Investor, bringing you the best tips and tools for reaching financial freedom through stock market investing. Takeaway number 1. Pay the price. Let's say that you want a new, nice watch. You go to the store to check out the offerings. You are really after something that will impress your friends and the lovely lady that you're dating. You now have a choice. Either you pay for the watch, or you steal it and run, because you have done your cardio, right? My guess is that you would choose option number 1, no matter your physical capacity. You would take out your card and swipe that thing. Do the right thing. The point is that you know that having a new watch comes with a price, a fee. And it's the same with investing. It comes with a price too. Throughout the videos on this channel, there are some recurring takeaways for high returns, one of them being a somewhat concentrated portfolio, with Peter Lynch perhaps being the exception. The concentrated portfolio brings with it a characteristic to your performance. It will be volatile. This is the price, the fee, for having high returns in the stock market over the long term. If you don't have the stomach to stay the course when your net worth decreases by, say, 20% during a single week, as 2 of your major holdings report quarterly earnings below what analysts expected, don't aim to maximize your returns, because the higher the returns, the higher this fee typically is. Let's say you already 10 years ago could visualize Netflix's bright future. You invested a large portion of your net worth in the stock. Well, you would be quite a rich person today. However, could you afford paying the price for this journey? Netflix has, during this period, had many major downturns. Would you have sat still in that boat during 2011, for example, when Netflix lost tons of customers and the stock price fell 80% from its peak during the ensuing months? Your portfolio returns would look terrible. What would you tell your spouse and your kids? Could you stomach facing them, knowing that you might have endangered their future? Would you still think that being almost all in Netflix is a good idea? This is, of course, an extreme example, but even if you have something less extreme than an all-in Netflix approach to investing, you'll have to pay the price of volatility nonetheless. Let's say that you bought an S&P 500 index fund in 1980. You'd still have to face about 13 years combined when your investment portfolio was down 20% from its high, and about 8 months when it was down 50%. That's tough. Stock market investing is a great thing that enables wealth creation like few other options. But don't try to fool yourself. It doesn't come for free. All investors will experience volatility, and you have to look at this as the price you pay for a brighter future. Takeaway number 2. Never enough.
It's a very interesting phenomenon that you can hand somebody a $2 million bonus and they're fine until they find out that the person next to them got $2.1 million, and then they're sick for the next year.
Capitalism is great at doing 2 things: generating wealth and generating envy. The urge to surpass your neighbors, peers, and friends can help energize your hard work and strive to really make it. And, of course, being motivated into becoming more productive and doing meaningful work is a good thing. But social comparison can also cause us to feel like we're never enough. Let's look at some statistics. To belong to the top 1% highest income earners in the US, you'd have to earn somewhere around $500,000 a year. That's what a highly specialized doctor, let's call him Bill, earns. And by almost any standard, Bill would be considered rich. He can afford to drive nice cars, go on long vacations to exotic countries, perhaps hire someone to do work which he thinks is tedious, etc. Bill has been feeling good about himself and what he has achieved financially in his life. Well, that was only until he bought a vacation home in the Hamptons and realized that he had Stan as his neighbor. Stan belongs to the top 1% of the 1%. He is a CEO of quite a large public company and earns a staggering $10 million per year. Now, you'd hope that at least Stan would be satisfied with his financial achievements. But nope. This guy was a childhood friend of Michael Jordan. And this all-time great basketball player is someone who belongs to the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. And well, compared to Michael's fortune of about $2 billion, Stan's yearly salary of $10 million suddenly seems like peanuts. Does it end here? Well, no, it doesn't. Because Michael occasionally attends parties with celebrities, where a guy named Jeff Bezos shows up. Bezos is the top 1% of the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. And he increased his net worth by about $75 billion in 2020, now sitting at something like $200 billion.
It's just the 1%.
There's always a bigger fish. The type of envy which has emerged from comparisons of this kind has caused a lot of people to do foolish things throughout history. Some have leveraged their portfolios to the teeth in order to move up to a higher pyramid, just to lose it all and then commit suicide. Some have acted on insider information and lost both personal reputation and then later their freedom when they've gone to jail. Many have forsaken their families and then had their partners leaving them or cheating on them, or both, as a result. By watching this channel and learning on how to become a successful investor, chances are that you will at some point reach a level of financial freedom that the average Joe can only dream about. But you need to, at some point, accept that enough is enough.
We will not trade something that we have and need for something that we don't have and don't need, even if we kind of like to have it.
Takeaway number 3. Crazy is in the eye of the beholder. At a first glance, it seems like a lot of people do crazy things with their money. Some spend it in ridiculous amounts on ridiculous items, and others hide it under their mattresses. But the thing to remember is that people come from different backgrounds, with different childhoods, different parents, different life experiences, and different educations. All this adds up to different perspectives and different values. What seems crazy to you might make total sense for me. Morgan uses the example of lottery tickets in the book. The lowest income households in the US spends more than $400 per year on the lottery. This is 4 times more than the average in the highest income group. Combine this with the fact that more than a third of Americans cannot come up with $400 for an emergency. Do these people spend their emergency buffer on lottery tickets? Seems crazy, doesn't it? But again,
I would say it's like, when it comes to spending money, I would say is, instead of spending on ridiculous prices, spend it wisely of what you want. Like, think before you hand it over to the others. Because if you just straight up just like say that, oh, I'm gonna buy this $1 million watch, and pretty much you just like straight up just bought this, and you would probably just think about in the future is, oh, it's just a watch. But some people will like look at it as, it's a good watch, I like it. It just depends on the person. But still, one thing is, if a person has $1 million watch, Do not envy that person. Pretty much, just always just say, really good shot. Like, I hope you like it. Or, what do you think of it? But yeah, pretty much, do not like have any like envy towards those people with like a lot of like wealth, and never try to compare yourself.
We do not have the same perspective as these individuals. Try to see it from their perspective. They live paycheck to paycheck, with little room to save money. They often lack education, and thus they also lack a nice career trajectory. They can't afford a nice vacation or a new car, and they can't put their children through college without a mountain of debt. Buying a lottery ticket is their way of buying into the dream that many of us already live. That is why they buy more lottery tickets than we do. Not so crazy, after all, perhaps. So, how does this make you a better investor? For one thing, by acknowledging that we are different, we become less tempted to copying an investment portfolio or strategy which doesn't suit our own goals. For example, our risk profile might be higher than that of a billionaire's, as our focus is more on the getting rich part and not so much about staying rich. Copying the billionaire's portfolio might be suboptimal for your goals. Acknowledging differences can also help us to say no more easily to investments that are outside our own circle of competence. Take GameStop, for example. As I am not a trader, I didn't participate in this drama at all. It's simply not my card to play. Understanding different people's perspectives, or at least that there are different lenses to see the world through, will help you make better sense of our society and lead you on the path that is yours. Takeaway number 4. Peekaboo! What does the Great Depression, World War II, the financial crisis, and COVID-19 all have in common? They were all events which shaped our society, they had huge impacts on the financial markets, and they were pretty much impossible to foresee. Nassim Taleb, who is one of my favorite authors, would refer to these events as black swans. The definition of a black swan is that
1. It's an outlier. Nothing that has happened before can convincingly point to even the possibility of the event. 2. It carries an extreme impact.
Yeah.
3. It becomes explainable only after the fact. Human nature fools us into believing that we should have been able to know it would happen all along.
Imagine it is Black Monday, 1987. How would you have reacted to the market losing almost 1/4 of its value in a single day? Would you have been one of the individuals that shouted, "Sell! Sell!" Or would you have been able to weather the storm? Perhaps putting in additional chips which you've kept on the sidelines. Here's an interesting fact. If you invested in the S&P 500 index 20 years ago, but you missed out on the 4 best performing stock market days, you'd have a 164% return instead of 291%. That's quite a big difference. The moral of this takeaway is that it's more useful to prepare yourself, both mentally and financially, for a disaster which you cannot foresee, than hoping that you're able to react before everyone else. Stop listening to macro projections. The things that will cause big fear among the investment community in the future are the things that are unlikely to be foreseen anyways. Takeaway number 5. The seduction of pessimism. If I were to give you a bunch of reasons to why the market will crash later this year, mentioning the gigantic US governmental debt, that stimulus checks may lead to the return of inflation, and perhaps something about a new strain of COVID-19, you would most likely be intrigued, and perhaps end up with quite a negative view of where in the market cycle that we are at the moment. Were I instead to give you examples of why things probably will continue to get better, by showing how life expectancy is rising, how sustainable energy is getting cheaper, or how computing power is exploding, you would most likely shrug your shoulders and not think twice about it. We all know that the pessimistic person sounds so very intelligent, and the optimist sounds naive in comparison. Why is that? Daniel Kahneman, the author of Thinking Fast and Slow, says that asymmetry towards loss and listening to pessimists is an evolutionary trait. When directly compared or weighted against each other, losses loom larger than gains. Organisms that treated threats as more urgent than opportunities have a better chance to survive and reproduce. We tend to listen to pessimists more carefully, not only for evolutionary reasons, but also because progress happens much slower than setbacks do. Progress rarely happens overnight, but setbacks often do. Because tragedies and setbacks happen during much shorter time periods, it's much easier to create an intriguing and persuading story around it, and thus it receives more attention. To create an optimistic story about the future, we must look at longer time horizons. This often becomes more vague and less dramatic. Knowing that you will perhaps be more fascinated by a pessimist and less so by an optimist can perhaps help you becoming less asymmetric towards this in the future. The world is better than you think, as Sweden's Hans Rosling would have said. So, you are not going to get rich in the stock market without paying the price of volatility. Envy is the worst of the 7 deadly sins. Never risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. Different perspectives cause different courses of action to become reasonable or rational. Instead of trying to foresee disasters, prepare yourself mentally and financially so that you can survive them. And be careful when taking investment advice. Understand that pessimism appeals more to your survival instincts than optimism does. That was it for today, but that was not it from Morgan Housel. Check out his book, it's a real gem. Here's a suggestion on what you can watch next if you want to understand more about human psychology.
Yeah, I would say spend your money wisely. And the thing is, it's because someone has more money to use. Like, let's say you have $500,000, and the person you look at has like $2 billion. Yes, you're gonna look small, but try to think about the other perspective. Look at the people who literally lack money more than looking at the rich. Think about it. And this is one strategy that my mama also taught me. Be blessed with what you have. Like, some people just lack certain things. And me, I often like compare myself to others. But pretty much, I should be just looking at that I am blessed instead of, oh, this person has more, this person has this. Be happy that you are blessed at something. And pretty much, if you have pretty much $1 billion, be blessed for it. But do not like just go around boasting or like flexing, and do not be envious of the next billionaire ahead of you. Grow your empathy and pretty much understand the type of like success you have is rare. Then you like straight up billionaires, bro. Like any billionaire out there, bro. Do not boast. Do not look down on others. Because all I do is just pretty much just boasting and arrogance. And even those mid ones who are like in the 500,000s still do not look down on people. And some of the poor folks like in my situation right now, do not envy the billionaires. I know it's a struggle, but keep going. I'm telling you, being good and having good character is way better than straight up having billions of dollars. Having good character is more valuable than having money in your life. Just think of money as a tool and not something that you should just look at as a big amount and just look at with desire and love. Because that stuff is bad. Money is the root to all types of evils. It's not the money itself. It's how it like pretty much controls you. If you let money control you, that is greed. And that's also lust. And I think later on that type of party, you're just gonna feel like that. Let's say like having like $600,000, you're just gonna feel like that's not enough. I need more money. Bro, I tell you, bro, like that is greed. And greed is one of the silly, deadly sins. But yeah. What else should we look at? Psychology of extreme self-belief.
Is there any limit to your ambition
No,
or any limit to what you think you can achieve?
no,
Why would you think you could make it to the NBA?
because I think I can do anything.
How in the world did you win this tennis match?
Believing.
You know what really separates you from the person living your dream life? They believed they could do it before they had any proof. That's it. Sounds crazy, right? Being delusional is supposed to be a bad thing. Everyone tells you to be realistic, but every person or penguin who did something worth remembering was called delusional first. Kobe said he would beat Jordan as a kid. Ali called himself the greatest before he had a single title. Were they delusional? I mean, yeah. Did it matter? I don't think so. So how do you actually master this? How do you become delusional in a way that works? First, you gotta understand something. There's a difference between delusional confidence and actual delusion. Actual delusion is thinking you can be a billionaire if you just scroll all day. Doesn't make sense, right? Delusional confidence is believing you can build something nobody thinks you can build. One gets you nothing, the other gets you everything you want. The trick is pairing that delusional belief with obsessive action. You can't just sit around believing you're great. You have to work like you're trying to prove everyone right. You believe something impossible, and then you work until it becomes inevitable. Because right now, your brain is wired for survival, not success. So when you think about taking a big risk, it automatically scans for everything that could go wrong. But that's normal. That's how everyone's brain works. But the good news is, you can reprogram it. Do one thing every day that scares you. Post the video, send the message, take the shot. Every time you move when your brain says don't, you're rewiring it. You're teaching yourself to act anyway. You're probably gonna feel like a fraud at first. You're gonna tell people your goals and watch them look at you like you're crazy. You're gonna work your ass off and see no results for months, or maybe years. But that's supposed to happen. That's not a sign you're doing it wrong. That's a sign you're doing something that matters. The people at the top aren't the most talented. They just refused to quit when it stopped making sense. They believed out of nowhere and worked till it became real, and that's what separates them from average. Answer me this. Why are you waiting for other people to validate your dreams before you chase them? Be delusional enough to start before you know how it ends. Between you and everything you want is just doubt. Not skill, not resources, just doubt. Okay, maybe skills too, but you can master them, right? But the only cure for doubt is action. Delusional action. The kind that makes people think you've lost your mind. Because at the end of the day, being realistic is the most unrealistic thing you can do if you actually want a different life. It's 2025 or 2026, I don't know, who cares? What I want you to care about is have crazy, crazy faith in yourself, and then work until everyone else calls it genius. That's how you master it.
Yeah, definitely like push yourself to your belief and have strong faith in yourself. But here's another thing is, do not go around and like looking down on people. After you achieve your dream, actually understand other people's pains too. Because it's better to like also like sometimes think of like other people too. Psychology of people who are too aware.
There is a certain kind of person who is very strange. They walk into a room and almost instantly feel that something is off. No one is raising their voice. There's no drama, but their brain has already finished scanning everything. An avoided glance, a forced smile, a sentence that sounds normal but is full of hidden fake energy. Many people think this kind of observation is a superpower, a wonderful gift, but the truth is, this sharp awareness is actually a psychological trap. The problem is that their brain has no off switch. They can't just enjoy the moment. They take it home, pick it apart, analyze it, and replay it in their head again and again. They are the kind of person who can turn one small silence into an entire universe of thoughts. But if you know someone like this, or if you are someone like this, you already know it isn't easy. Because hyper-awareness is not just an intelligence issue. It's about constantly seeing the hidden layers of meaning that other people walk right past without noticing. It can feel like a gift, but it is also a cruel burden that slowly drains all of your emotional energy. Today we are going to decode the psychology of people who are over-aware, and how they can avoid being swallowed by their own mind. First, we have to dig into the origin of this sharp awareness. Why do some people become overly aware? Empirical psychology usually divides this phenomenon into two main groups. For the first group, this sensitivity is simply inborn. Science calls them highly sensitive persons, HSP. People who carry the trait known as sensory processing sensitivity, SPS. Their nervous system, from the moment they are born, is like an ultra-fine filter that automatically absorbs and feels everything more intensely than usual. For them, the world always appears in extremely high resolution. However, for the second group, over-awareness is not something they were born with. It is an inheritance of survival. Neuroscience calls this state hypervigilance. It often takes root in an emotionally unstable environment in the past, most commonly during childhood. Imagine a child growing up in a house where the mood of the adults changes like the weather. That child cannot live innocently. They have to learn how to become a radar station. They might have been the kind of child who memorized the sound of car tires rolling into the garage, just to know whether their father was coming home drunk or sober. They learned to hear the sound of a kitchen cabinet slamming and measure how angry their mother was. They knew exactly when to step into the living room and smile, and when to disappear quietly into the corner. Biologically speaking, their amygdala, the brain's danger alarm center, has been constantly activated. It records a message. This environment is not safe. I have to keep scanning to avoid danger. No one taught them this. Their nervous system automatically built a network of neurons to help them predict emotional disasters before they happen. And over time, that survival vigilance transforms into awareness. That awareness grows so deep that it becomes part of their identity. When they become adults, they often look back and blame themselves. Why do I always overthink? Something must be wrong with me. But no, they are not broken. They are simply carrying a kind of intelligence that was shaped by survival. The shield that once protected them has now fused into their skin. So when that shield, that massive awareness, enters adult life, how does it actually show up? Let's move to sign 1, living in constant analysis mode. This is the clearest sign and also the one that consumes the most energy. For a typical person, a conversation is just a conversation. But for them, the mind is always running a hidden equation. Take a real example. Their boss sends a message on Slack at 4 p.m. Come see me for a minute later. For other people, that's simply a meeting. But for them, the moment they read the message, a wave of tension immediately appears. They sense something unusual in the wording, a kind of invisible coldness. They feel the atmosphere of the sender and instantly begin questioning themselves. Is my boss upset? Did I mess something up? They don't just hear words. They notice the 3-second pause before someone compliments the shirt they're wearing. They catch a very slight change in the other person's breathing. Part of this phenomenon is related to the activity of the default mode network, DMN, the brain system involved in reflection and self-referential thinking. In most people, the DMN becomes active mainly during daydreaming or rest. But in people who are overly aware, this network tends to be more active, which makes the mind slip into constant analysis and interpretation. Half of them is nodding, smiling, holding a cup of coffee, and participating in life. But the other half is taking notes, comparing details, and analyzing everything. The result is that their mind rarely gets any real rest. They can feel exhausted even after spending the whole day sitting in an office, because their brain has just finished running a hidden marathon. That analysis does not only point outward, it turns the camera inward, creating sign 2, hyper self-awareness. In psychology, metacognition is the ability to think about your own thinking. It is controlled by the prefrontal cortex. Everyone has this ability, but for them, it is a switch that never turns off. They do not just feel an emotion, they monitor it. The familiar chain reaction often looks like this. An emotion appears, followed by analyze it, and then judge it. They are walking outside and suddenly feel sad. Instead of simply letting themselves feel sad, they immediately cross their arms and start judging themselves. Why am I sad? Does this sadness even make sense? I should feel grateful because I have a good job, so why do I feel empty? I'm terrible for feeling this way. Even joy gets dissected. They are at a dinner party and just laughed at a joke, but the very next second, part of their mind is floating near the ceiling, looking down and evaluating. Did I laugh too loudly? That might have sounded a little fake. It is just like dancing while constantly staring at your reflection in a mirror to fix your posture. They may not miss a single step, but they lose the sense of flow. Their depth of awareness increases, but their natural presence slowly disappears. When that analytical camera runs for too long, they move into sign 3, losing innocence in relationships. Deep awareness makes them start to see the backstage of human behavior. Psychology calls this strong inference about other people's intentions, related to the ability known as theory of mind. They realize that people do not always say exactly what they think. They see a coworker bring them a coffee and praise the project they just completed. Instead of simply enjoying the compliment, their brain immediately scans possible motives. What favor does this person want? Are they hoping I'll share customer data with them? They realize that kindness sometimes comes with conditions. Affection can sometimes be a calculated investment, and the confidence of a man on a date might simply be a curtain hiding his fear of rejection. This creates a quiet kind of loss. It is not the loss of childhood innocence, but the loss of relational innocence. The ability to fully trust the surface of words is no longer there. As a result, a compliment always seems to carry layers. An apology never feels complete because they suspect the other person is apologizing just to calm the situation, not because they truly accept fault. A promise sounds fragile. They do not become bitter or hateful toward the world. They simply become extremely cautious. And sometimes they feel lonely, even in a crowd, because no one else seems to see the layer of truth they are seeing. And that layer of truth is not just logical reasoning. It sinks into their feelings, leading to sign 4, empathy that is always switched on. For them, empathy is not a skill they choose to use when a friend is crying. It is a state that cannot be turned off. They walk into a meeting room, no one says a word, but they can feel the weight of irritation between two coworkers. Their mind works like a sheet of absorbent paper. Psychology calls this ability cognitive empathy. But for people who are overly aware, it does not stop at understanding with the mind. It crosses into emotional empathy, where they actually absorb and live inside another person's pain as if it were their own. This phenomenon is closely connected to neural systems that process empathy, especially mirror neurons. When they see someone expressing emotion, these neurons in their brain activate as if they themselves are experiencing that same emotion. But for an overly aware person, it becomes absorption. Someone sitting next to them on the bus taps their foot with nervous energy, and suddenly their own heart starts beating faster. A friend talks about their divorce, and after they go home, that pain sits in their chest for 3 days. What is the result? They become the emotional regulator for everyone around them. They know how to soften their voice and choose careful words to calm the atmosphere. People like being around them because they feel understood. But the price is exhaustion. They become a container for other people's emotional waste. And at the end of the day, very few people realize that the one who always understands others also needs someone to understand them. Those suppressed emotions do not disappear. They move straight into the body. Sign 5. When awareness becomes tied to the body and anxiety. Awareness does not exist only in the mind. Science calls this concept interoception, the ability to sense the internal state of the body, processed by the insular cortex. People who are overly aware often have an extremely sensitive interoception system. They drink a cup of espresso, their heart beats a little faster because of the caffeine. For most people, that simply feels like alertness. But for their nervous system, the brain detects the faster heartbeat, flips through its data records, and shouts, "Fast heartbeat equals danger. We're about to have a panic attack." Normal physical sensations become exaggerated warning signals. This creates a brutal anxiety loop. A physical sensation appears. Then, the brain misinterprets it as danger. Then, the body activates a stress response and releases hormones like cortisol, which leads to even stronger physical sensations. The result is that their body becomes a constant stream of emergency data. They feel restless and uneasy all the time, even when nothing truly bad is happening. When signals from the body and emotions become overwhelming, the mind starts searching for one final escape to restore order. That is when awareness quietly transforms from a lens of observation into a strategy of control. This is not control over others in a forceful way. It is a subtle inner defense mechanism. They operate based on an unspoken belief. If they can predict every possible variable, they will not be surprised by pain. For them, understanding becomes a kind of armor. They believe that seeing the landing point of disappointment ahead of time will prevent them from collapsing when it finally arrives. Their mind begins running simulations non-stop, quietly and endlessly in the background. They ask themselves, what if that person suddenly pulls away? What if everything they are working so hard to build disappears tomorrow? If the worst situation really happens, how should they react so they do not fall apart? This leads to a state called analysis paralysis. They get trapped inside a maze of assumptions, living in 10 different versions of the future while dissecting every possible risk, even when the present moment has not fully happened yet. This constant vigilance keeps them from ever fully belonging to the present. The cruelest result of this protective strategy is the trade-off it creates. In trying to stay ahead of pain, they slowly step outside their own life. Instead of participating in the flow of life with all its uncertainty and beauty, they begin managing life like a high-risk project. Protection replaces presence, leaving them exhausted from constantly guarding against the ghosts of the future. So what can overly aware people do? They cannot simply turn off their awareness. It is like asking someone with perfect vision to try to see everything as blurry. The solution is not to become less aware. The solution is to stop carrying everything. In psychotherapy, this usually involves setting emotional boundaries and adjusting patterns of thinking. They need to learn how to notice things but refuse to absorb them. People who manage to move beyond this burden often anchor themselves in 3 freeing principles. First, not every silence is a hidden message. If someone replies slowly to a text, sometimes they are simply exhausted. If a coworker walks past without smiling, maybe they just have a headache. They learn not to personalize everything. Second, not every emotion that appears needs an action to solve it. Anxiety may show up. Instead of rushing to analyze why, they simply say, "Oh, my heart is beating fast, it's just a physical sensation." They observe it without judgment and let it pass. Third, not every insight needs to be spoken or acted on. They may see someone's insecurity clearly, but they do not have to become that person's therapist. They may notice instability in a relationship, and sometimes the best response is simply to step back. They begin to realize that clarity is only a gift when it comes with boundaries, knowing what belongs to them to handle and what belongs to the world to leave alone. When they practice this kind of letting go, something remarkable begins to happen. Their awareness does not disappear. It softens. It matures. They still see deeply into human nature, but they no longer cling to the flaws of others. They can still feel the energy of a room very strongly, but they are no longer pulled into its current. The shift happens inside them. They move from using awareness to predict to using it to be present. They move from fear to curiosity. Instead of analyzing whether someone's smile is fake, they simply enjoy a sunny afternoon and a good cup of coffee. Their life finally becomes lighter, not because the outside world becomes simpler or because people suddenly become less complicated. The world is still full of contradictions. Life becomes lighter because they stop trying to carry every equation of the world on their shoulders at the same time. They cannot turn off the ceiling light in their mind, but they can change its intensity. They can turn it from a sharp laser that exposes every flaw into a warm candle. A candle bright enough to understand human fragility, yet gentle enough to warm themselves as well. These are the people who think deeply, the people who feel deeply. If you ever look at them and notice their quietness, understand that it is not indifference. It is a beautiful form of wisdom, a wisdom that has learned to understand life instead of being imprisoned by it. If this feels familiar, if you see yourself somewhere in the world of overly aware people, leave a comment about the sign that fits you the most. And remember, you are not alone on this journey. The depth you carry is not a flaw. It is a gift that is waiting for your understanding and compassion. If this video helped you feel a little lighter and gave you a new way to see yourself, please press like and share it with a friend. Someone who may also be tired of the noise from a mind that never truly rests. Your understanding today might be exactly the comfort they need. Thank you for watching until this moment. I'm Apex. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any upcoming videos. Goodbye and see
But yeah, I was good watching like psychology. But yeah, pretty much when it comes to being aware, pretty much instead of actually just straight up just like direct and like that person is saying like, oh, you must be overthinking or you must be like pretty much too sensitive. Try to actually understand their actions instead of like pretty much just straight up just hitting like a direct attack. Like try to like say like let's say someone's like really hyper aware and you just see them from being cautious. No moments of that person and don't just straight up say, "Oh, you probably overthinking. You probably like just assuming all things." Try to like pretty much actually understand about that like hyper awareness person's perspective. But yeah, pretty much try to like pretty much develop different traits and like those good stuff. But remember, like just because something looks good, there are still some downsides to each of them. In life, pretty much, even though something looks good, but it still costs. Like person with empathy carries like the person's like burdens and pains, and now pretty much they gonna have to dump all the other person's pains. Like the person pain that empath person absorbs, they gonna have to like dump it out. But everything has its really ups and downs in life. Everything in life has a cost. But yeah, that was a good pretty much time. Hope everybody has a great day.